안녕하십니까.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Let us now begin the conference on the future of smart urban planning based on big data of the 2021 World Smart City Expo. I am Secretary General Kim Sung-yeon of Korea Planning Association. Very nice to meet you all. Thank you very much. At this conference, we will represent new ways to understand modern urban planning through big data and have presentations and discussions on big data-based analysis and city governance of the future smart city. This conference is streamed live on the 2021 World Smart City Expo website and YouTube City TV in both English and Korean. Let us begin the conference with the opening remarks by Kim Hyun-soo, President of Korea Planning Association. Let us all watch the video.
안녕하세요.
Good afternoon. I am the president of the Korea Planning Association, Kim Hyun-soo. The World Smart City Expo is the largest smart city event in the Asia-Pacific region, where experts from governments and businesses from all over the world gather to envision the cities of the future. Today's event will serve as an opportunity to share the smart city vision and seek for further advancement of the cities under the slogan "Smart City becomes a reality." I am very pleased to have our association participate in such an event. Our association has a 62-year history and members of 7,000 and is an academic society in the field of land and urban planning. We take interest in the issues related to land, cities, housing, and smart cities, as well as data-based urban planning systems. In particular, in the era post-COVID-19, we are taking interest in the national territories and how they would change along with the changes of the cities. Around this time, about a year ago, there were predictions that big cities would be shut down because of fear of being infected from the virus. But we are seeing digital transformation accelerate, platform companies growing, data-driven industry grow, and new jobs being created. The metropolitan area of Seoul is growing into a megacity, but at the same time, new social issues, such as widening gaps between industries and regions, are also emerging. In particular, platform companies and database industries and logistics and financial sectors are experiencing mega companies or strong businesses emerging, such as Kakao Bank, and also data-based companies are growing rapidly. In the field of geospatial information, we are seeing rapid growth as well. Among the data, a lot of data is actually related to transportation, eating out, finding restaurants, commuting, real estate, culture, welfare, and etc. And a lot of the data have spatial location related properties. So this kind of data is built, and they're called a data dam. Dams are being developed to promote related industries, and this is actually part of the Digital New Deal policy of the Korean government. And our association has been taking interest in this trend, and next month during our fall symposium we will be holding a conference which will be a metaverse conference. I don't really know that much about metaverse technology, but perhaps my avatar will give a congratulatory speech during that conference. Last year we utilized Zoom and YouTube for many academic events, and these tools actually provided a new momentum for academic activities. Next year, perhaps Metaverse can provide us with a new opportunity for communication, and perhaps our seminars might change in terms of their format. So I think that around next week, most of the Korean people will receive their second vaccination and will be fully vaccinated. Now, does that mean that we'll go back to before COVID-19, which will be about 2 years ago? Well, I think that the fear of infection might disappear, but the highly developed non-face-to-face technology will have totally changed the appearance of our cities and academic activities, and also the fabric of our society. University lectures, work patterns, distribution, cultural performances, and sports watching are quite different compared to the past. If you look throughout history, you will find that the pandemic in Greece and Rome 2,000 years ago brought about the introduction of grid-type street networks and sanitation facilities. And 600 years ago in medieval Europe, pandemic had led to geometrical ideal city planning. Also, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, London tried to solve urban problems of the time and respond to the pandemic by implementing sanitation-related measures and a garden city. And in the 21st century, Korea is trying to deal with the pandemic by dealing with confirmed cases based on big data. For example, you utilize location information of credit cards and transportation cards, and also CCTV information. So these are all used for big data to identify and track the movements of the confirmed cases to control the spread of COVID-19. Actually, I think that looking back 150 years ago, this is based on Renee Howard's Garden City, the Public Health Act of 150 years ago, and now it is time to go towards a new transformation. I think that the goal will be data-driven smart cities. Data-based means that it's about planning the process and methods, and smart cities is actually about the physical facilities in the city. The way to advance urban planning actually is to plan for data-based smart cities. I do believe that urban planning theory has been accumulated and developed over the past 100 years, and I do believe that big changes will be inevitable to these theories. I would like to thank our speakers, Professor Raymond Ong of Singapore National University, and also Dave Lindenthal of Cambridge University. Thank you very much for joining us as presenters. Also, Professor Kim Young-gil from University, Professor Lee Hee-jung of University of Seoul. Thank you very much. Also, Professor in particular, Professor Lee Hee-jung, she actually worked very hard to contact and invite the guests. And also, she actually is the head of the Big Data AI Research Institute of the University of Seoul. So she is an expert in this field. And also Vice President Choi, thank you very much. And also Professor Lee Jae-sing of Seoul National University, Lee Kwan-wook University of Singapore National University. Also Dr. Choi Jun-young of the Seoul Technology Research Institute. And also Mr. Lee Soo-jae from Seoul City. And Mr. Lee Jong-hyun of Urban Planning, the director of MOLIT. Thank you very much. And also Secretary General Kim Song-hyun and everyone at the Secretariat, thank you very much. I do hope that the future of smart urban planning based on big data, this seminar will provide a momentum for pioneering a new history of urban planning. Thank you very much.
네, 이어서 오늘
Thank you. Let us now move on to the presentations. We have 2 overseas speakers and 2 speakers from home. It will be a total of 4 presentations. The first presentation would be under the topic Application of Smart City Features to Singapore's Planning Practices. We will have Professor Raymond Ong from National University of Singapore to present. He sent us a pre-recorded video of his presentation, but he will be joining us online for the Q&A session. So then, Professor Ong, we would like to now begin the video.
Hello everyone, I'm Raymond Ong from the National University of Singapore. Today, I'm happy to be here to share with you my thoughts on the applications of smart city features to Singapore's planning practices. Now, without further ado, let me give you an introduction on what Smart Nation is from the context of Singapore. Now, Smart Nation is a Singapore government initiative to harness infocom technologies, networks, and big data to create technology-enabled solutions. Now, this initiative was first launched by our Prime Minister on 24th November 2014. And some of the areas that what we are looking at include enhancing public transportation network, enabling successful aging, and ensuring that there's a secure but open data marketplace. And in particular, we are talking about the Smart Nation Sensor Platform, or the SNSP, which tracks and analyzes data related to housing, amenities, and public infrastructures. As you can see from this slide over here, that we are talking about the use of technology to enhance Singapore's position as a leading global city and improve the quality of life, including through various initiatives that I will be discussing in the later slides. Now, when we talk about a smart city or a smart nation, a city's smartness can be characterized by using a set of characteristics. And this could include an infrastructure-based approach around technology, and then the use of environmental initiatives, an effective and highly functional public transportation system, a confident and progressive city plans, and people being able to work and live within the city using its own resources. And keeping this in mind, Singapore's Smart Nation initiatives include various strategic national projects that aim to bring these forward to the next decade. And these could include the National Digital Identity System, the e-payment system, the Moments of Life initiative, the Smart and Sustainable Punggol District, and the Smart and Urban Mobility initiative that has been launched in Singapore. Now, let me share with you the features of a smart town, and in particular, we'll be talking about a recently upcoming residential estate in Singapore, and that is the Tengah estate that is in Singapore. Now, this Tengah estate promises about 42,000 new homes over 5 residential districts, and it will be a 24th new settlement by Singapore's government since World War II, and it's the first residential town that actually has centralized cooling, automated trash collection, and a car-free town center. And this was actually featured in the CNN news channel. Now, what are some of the features of this smart town? This include using a smart planning approach whereby computer simulation and data analytics are applied or adopted to improve the way towns and precincts are built and planned for. And in addition, we are also talking about using a system of sensors that actually capture real-time environmental information. And these could actually help us model or monitor the environmental quality of the town. At the same time, we're using smart technology such as smart systems to collect and analyze data to optimize maintenance and preempt problems. And in terms of living, smart living involves the use of digital infrastructures in flats to pave the way for intelligent or smart homes. And last but not the least, a smart community whereby data analytics and infocom technologies are adopted for community bonding sessions or bonding efforts. Now, from the industrial aspect, let me share with you another smart district which contains of residential, industry, and the academia. Now, this is the new Punggol Digital District in Singapore, which is dubbed to be the Singapore's first smart business district. This 50-hectare district, as you can see, basically incorporates a business park, academic institution, which is the Singapore Institute of Technology, as well as community facilities. And it will be powered by an open digital platform, which will collect real-time data from the district, which can be used to roll out solutions such as optimizing temperature in building. And when it's fully ready, this digital district is going to create close to 28,000 digital economy jobs. And this Punggol Digital District is envisioned to be the community playground and green hut for residents. And it also contains a car light precinct, which allows everyone to travel with ease. And it will be a vibrant economic and learning hub. And of course, it's a pilot district whereby we will share spaces between industry and the academia. Now, in the context of future urban mobility, okay, we are talking about things such as e-payment systems, whereby we are building up payment services and various network link solutions or using bank cards for public transport. And more importantly, we are having this smart lamppost, which actually consists of various aspects such as a security camera and also city level sensors that's being installed on this lamppost to collect city data, environmental data, which will be useful for mobility planning and environmental planning. And of course, we have been trialing mobility on demand services, hands-free ticketing technology, autonomous shuttle, and autonomous buses. Now, all these require a rethink in technology and are very data-centric and data-intensive. And as such, we will expect that the urban planning landscape will be changed to accommodate for these new disruptive technologies or even the new transportation modes that are arising. So as such, we are looking into a new integrated approach whereby we have to adopt or adapt urban planning for future urban mobility, especially in the context of autonomous vehicle or bus infrastructure planning, policies and regulations for operations in Singapore, or even the use of active mobility such as bicycles, e-scooters, and other mobility modes that are basically that do not emit any emission. So these are some of the planning norms that may need to be relooked into. And these call for a new approach in transport or urban infrastructure planning. And we are talking about understanding demand. And then now the demand is going to influence not only transport planning, infrastructure planning, it also includes energy or even the activities that is going to be in those precincts. And this is going to integrate with urban planning norms and then in effect also affect the operations in this aspect. Now, all in all these are expected to contribute to economic development, environmental sustainability, zero energy, zero carbon, jobs and employment, and active aging. Now, in the next few slides, I will share with you how we actually do adapt urban planning norms for the use of electric vehicles and or potentially autonomous vehicles. So in the era of electric vehicles, Singapore actually has a vision to go full electric by 2040, and we expect policies to change from today until 2030 to actually promote a full electric future by 2040. Now, to facilitate the wider adoption of electric vehicles, the corresponding infrastructure has to be established first. However, it's not a simple problem because we have done many trials, but they are very project level wise. There needs to be an integrated urban planning norm or urban transport planning approach to identify, let's say, parking solutions, charging solutions, and how the residential or business district or industrial area is going to adopt or adapt or change with respect to this location. So what we have proposed is that we have done actually a 4-step network for our projects, and we actually look into the demand classification, the type of users, and then the demand distribution. And then we look into how to actually deploy the facility and to plan the urban area around that facility. But at the same time, we'll also be talking about the energy infrastructure, whereby we need to actually upgrade our energy infrastructure, be it a fast charger or a normal charger, a 22 kilovolt these power charging or the normal plug that we are using. So all this needs to be actually designed for and catered for at the urban planning stage. So without an integrated transport urban planning, it's almost impossible to get this done. And thereafter, we will have to see how we can actually accommodate these considerations into the generic framework of a car-like city and a smart city framework. And based on all this, we have actually done forecasts on the potential charging locations in Singapore for the short term and the long term. The short term is because electric vehicle technology is still rather in the nascent stage and is still expected to mature over the next 5 to 10 years. And by then, we will have vehicles that have a longer range or a shorter charging time, and hence there need to be a long-term charging forecast. And based on that, we can actually plan our urban areas accordingly for that use. And similarly, we will be able to find out, for example, the total number of charging slots, the number of charging slots per site and the maximum number of sites so that we can actually consolidate planning of the urban districts or the area for the purpose of electrification. Now, while all these are actually discussing about the technologies, okay, but we have to understand that urban planning and transportation planning for the smart city cannot be only about the technology. And we have to leave no one behind, because there are always people who may not understand or use the technology. And as such, I have written in this slide perhaps to say that do not forget the elderly and the less advantaged. And this is something that is very important. A smart city must also be compassionate, and we have to also think from their perspective. And in addition, nature reserves and protections should be considered with very serious thoughts. And technology has to be inclusive and not treated as a means to just get things done and make it more efficient. Efficiency is one thing, but we want it to be more than efficient. It has to be relatable and compassionate or empathetic to the needs of the residents. And last but not the least, we have experienced the pandemic in recent years, and we see that we are going to live in an endemic future. And in this part, technology have to be playing a very huge role in helping a city to be smart and yet resilient against future pandemics. And with this, I hope that I've given you some of the thoughts that I have on the application of smart city features in urban planning. And if you have any question, I'll be very happy to answer them. Thank you very much, and thanks.
네, 박수 한번 주시.
Yes, thank you very much. Please, a big round of applause. So, smart city and smart nation, he talked about the Singapore experience. Thank you very much for your presentation, Professor Raymond Ong.
Let us move on to the second presentation. The topic is Big Data and Machine Learning Applications in Real Estate Research. We would like to invite Professor T.S. Lindenthal from the University of Cambridge.
A very good morning from Cambridge. My name is T.S. Lindenthal, and I'm an Associate Professor of Real Estate Finance here at the Department of Land Economy. The Department of Land Economy is a truly interdisciplinary department. So while I'm researching mostly real estate finance, some of my colleagues are working on planning, they're working on the law, and so we have this culture of looking at one problem from many different angles. The research I'm going to share with you today is interdisciplinary as well, but it's touching more onto domains such as computer vision, machine learning, and then how these can be used to model cities in a more human way. The research is also very, very personal, because it is about something that I've been thinking about for quite a long time. I've been talking to many of my friends and family about for a long time, and it was really triggered by an observation. My parents, they live in a very rural area in northern Germany. So it's this beautiful landscape, very old houses, everything is really pristine and pretty. And whenever I go there, I'm stunned by the beauty of it. At the same time, I'm surprised, because when I just walk out of the door of my parents' house, I can see new development, and it looks like this. So you have a beautiful old village, you have hardly any planning constraints, you have a very high degree of freedom on how people can build their houses. And this is what they built. So this is the view from my parents' door across the street onto a very modern, a very good quality German house. But I'm not sure if I'm the only one here, but I think it's a very bland design. It's very boring, and it is not pretty at all. And the question I have here is, if you have all the freedom to build whatever you like to build, why do you build like this? Why don't you choose something that is more innovative or more beautiful, or something that is something special, more personal? So why is it such a cookie cutter design? And while I was thinking about that, while I was talking to my family about that, they were saying, yeah, maybe you're just a snob. Maybe you're just somebody from the city who cannot really, relate well to what people really like. And that really triggered my interest in this field. And it triggered a line of papers that I've been working on with colleagues here in Cambridge. But before I go to these papers, let me give you a little tour through pictures that I've collected in the past years. And this is my collection of bland, somewhat ugly modern designs. So this is a picture I took in East England. This is in the city of Norwich. So this is a new development, and somebody thinks that this is a good thing to build. Again, another example, again, from Southeast England. And you can have many, many of these examples of developers building large developments which are not really appealing aesthetically, at least in my book. And this is not just a new phenomenon. Here we see a design from maybe the 1970s and 1980s, where somebody put this strange looking detached house next to a terraced house from the Victorian age. So this really begs the question, why do we see this? So why do developers choose a certain design? Why do people buy certain houses? And why do planners, and how do planners deal with that? So with my team here in Cambridge, we've been working on a series of papers that try to understand really how we look at buildings, and we try to teach computers to look at buildings and cities in a more human way. And that is really the link also to the presentation of Raymond before. So we try really to give a smart city a human element. So we try to bring people back into the equation and to make sure that nobody's left behind, even if they don't use technology at all. So the research agenda is straightforward. We try to make computers a bit more human. We try to emulate this experience and this process of somebody walking down a street, looking left and right, and thereby learning a lot about what is going on in this city, and also to learn a little bit about how we as humans interact with that city and how we perceive the city. So very, very briefly, the first paper we wrote was straightforward. We used new sensors to learn more about the buildings and the investments and what is really done on the ground. We wrote a little program that could collect images from Google Street View, automatically detect features such as vintage, such as the size of buildings, the building quality, and so on. And this sounds straightforward in maybe the Korean or in Singaporean mindset, but for the UK, we do not really have good data on the quality of the building on the ground. So using sensors are really a good way to learn more about what kind of buildings we really have. And the paper got recently published in the University of Science and Economics. A second paper that was triggered by the first one was really about understanding how these applied machine learning models work. So we were not really content about the fact that our models are black boxes, so that we cannot really tell why a certain building, why a certain image is classified in a specific way. And we then applied machine learning techniques to interpret the classifications of the buildings and to see a little bit more what it was that triggered a specific outcome. And what you can see here, just very, very briefly, is a picture of an interwar building, a detached home in Cambridge. And we asked the computer to classify the vintage of that building. And what we were going after in this research is really then to see which features, is it the doors, is it the windows, is it the roof line, and so on, is really leading to a classification of vintage here. And the interesting bit was that the features that were picked up by the models are very much in line with the features that our architect friends told us are important. So the model is really putting a lot of emphasis on distinct elements such as doors and windows and ratios. So we're very confident that what the machine is seeing is really related to what an architect would see, and therefore it is a good double check of what we think is really a reliable interpretation of the built environment. But here we were really treating the machine learning models as black boxes. But the more we talked about it, we thought that, hey, it's not just the machines that are black boxes, it's also the way how humans look at buildings is really not that transparent. And we wanted to use machine learning techniques to understand the subjective perceptions of buildings and the aesthetics and the uniqueness or charm of buildings. And that's a new working paper with Caroline Schmidt and Wayne Wan that we're working on. And so at the core, what we do is we try to observe what people like. So we built a small app where people can quickly like or dislike houses, so 2,000 photos in there. And then we train machine learning models for each participant, an individual model on personal taste. So we create a sort of digital twin of all of our participants. And later we can then analyze which features are attractive, whether the people have the same kind of taste. And we can also see whether reviewed preferences match the self-reported preferences. And this experiment is still ongoing, so if you wanted to, you can click on that link that I'm showing here, and you could also rank a few images for us. The key findings of the research is that there's an incredible diversity in text. We had expected a bimodal distribution so that the majority of people either like or dislike a particular image of a building, so that there is some kind of consensus on beauty. And this is absolutely not the case. We see a massive divergence in taste, and this is not just about people coming from different countries, different age groups. It's even within age groups in countries that we see a very, very strong distribution of people liking or disliking particular buildings. But there is some kind of shared theme here. So mostly positive are pictures that show houses that are surrounded by a lot of gardens, greenery, trees, that are built with high quality materials, and very often which are historic buildings. So this is something that most people tend to like. And not very surprising, the mostly negative buildings are usually neglected, low quality, and don't really have some kind of inherent style, or they're usually a bit of ad hoc build. So this is not so surprising, to be honest. What we found most interesting were the cases where we have a lot of mixed responses. So some people liking it, some people hating it. And so where do these differences come from then? What we see is that sometimes it's about the backgrounds in these images. So it might just be a case that our experiment should be set up slightly differently, but sometimes it's just about taste. So if you look at the modern building at the bottom right here, some people hate it, some people love it. And so this is really the question that we are after. We ask our participants to rank about 2,000 images, and this doesn't take long in the app. And once we've done that, we then can train individual models of the responses by participants. And the exciting news is that these models are pretty good. They're not perfect, but they can predict whether somebody will like or dislike a particular building. And it's not, again, it's not one model for everybody. No, it is one individual model for each participant. And that is novel, and it can be used in a number of ways. So, for instance, what we can directly show is that what what developers try to achieve. They try to build something that fits many different personal tastes. That doesn't really work out very often. So one aesthetic fits all taste. No, we don't see that. We see that many people dislike a particular look, and to find this common ground is very difficult. From a planning perspective, this new work is also interesting because if you work in a case-based planning system where people can object to new designs, what we often see is that there are a mix-up of objections. So here, this is a computer-rendered image of a new development that was planned in my neighborhood in Cambridge. And this is a fascinating example of more than 300 people objecting to that design or to that development. Very often they were saying, we don't like the design. What they were really saying is, we don't like this building in our neighborhood. But they were saying, we hate the design. There was not a single person liking the design. If we now take our machine learning generated digital twins of our participants and ask them to rank this design, the outcome is a lot more positive. So still many people dislike it, but there are quite a few people who like it. And what we can see here is that by using digital twins instead of people who really have a stake in the evaluation of these designs, we can arrive at a more fair planning outcome here, because people did not really dislike the design. Some of them did, of course, but not everybody. They just wanted a smaller building. And if we then use technology to understand the personal preferences better, then we can overcome these kind of misunderstandings and hopefully arrive at better planning outcomes. This was roughly what I was trying to share with you today. So what we are really after here in our research group is to understand better what people are really seeing, and what we can also understand better is how inconsistent sometimes their preference is. So for instance, in this figure here, what you can see is how people get more grumpy in time. So they dislike more and more images they're shown. And this just shows that our perception is not always the same, unlike a computer model, which will always be identical. So the main finding is really that we can create personal classifiers. So we can train machine learning models for individual people, and it only takes about 20 minutes of their time. The predictions are not perfect, but they are consistent, unlike the decisions made by humans. So in that sense, those black box machine models are, yes, they're black boxes, but at the same time, they're different black boxes from the black box between our ears, because our own perceptions are also black boxes. And the machine learning models help us really to understand how we look at the built environment, and thereby they can play a crucial role in smart cities, because in the end, a smart city is about the people who use that city, who live in that city, and who interact with that city throughout their life. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my research, and I would love to hear from you, so don't hold back and reach out to me electronically. Thank you very much.
네, 린덴탈 교수님께 다시 한번 감사.
Yes, Professor Lindenthal, thank you very much for your presentation. This is an area of heightened interest in Korea. It was about big data-based analysis on land and real estate. Thank you very much for overcoming the time difference to present live for this conference. Thank you very much. Let us move on.
하겠습니다. 이번
Let's go on to the third presentation. This will be a presentation on the third round Newtown Project Smart City Basic Strategy and Applications.
네, 반갑습니다.
Yes, good afternoon. I am Professor Kim Young-gyu of Korea University. Department of Urban Engineering. So I will be talking about the third generation Newtown Smart City Planning. Now, based on the request of LH Corporation, I have been working with the Korea Planning Association for building the basic strategy and application measures. First of all, I'll talk about the main points and talk about also how we analyze the smart city trends and obtained insight. We selected the services and also came up with 6 specialized models. As you know, the third generation new towns are being developed. 남양주, 왕숙, 하남 교산, 고양 창롱, 인천 계양, 부천 대장. 6 areas have been designated as being part of the third generation of new towns that will be developed, and then Gwacheon, Siheung, and Ansan have been added on as part of the third generation new town project. Now, the third generation of new towns is not simply aimed at stabilizing the real estate market, but actually we are trying to make the new towns smart cities. And there have been some technologies and services that have been discussed, and we believe that this is a good opportunity for us to actually test these technologies and aspects of smart cities. So that's why we conducted the research related to the new town, the third generation new town. So we first came up with a vision of the new towns, and also we thought about how we will build a smart city in the new towns to prepare ourselves for the future. And so we did analysis and prior studies. We set the basic direction. We selected the technology services and came up with the ways to apply and expand the services. And also we came up with the plans for application of smart city technology. I will not be able to give you all the details, but I will give you some glimpse of what we've been working on. We first did analysis of foreign cases to identify the current trends of smart cities. As you know, there's the Sidewalk Labs in Toronto and the Woven City of Toyota. So we did an analysis of many other foreign cases, including these 2. For example, mobility, logistics, distribution, energy, keywords, and services came out of our analysis. We also did analysis of the smart technology trends. As you can see on the left, there was an SME strategic technology and the Korean style New Deal project technology. We had some keywords that we wanted to identify to do the technology trend analysis so that the technologies that we look into meet our needs. And we were able to come up with 11 core technologies for smart cities. Also, we met with essential stakeholders and experts to identify the needs of the citizens and identify what is required at smart cities. We conducted a survey, for example. We had interviews with the stakeholders and the experts to identify what kind of demands or needs exist in each of the locations. Not only that, well, the first and second generation of new towns were looked into, and we thought about how we can come up with the right direction for the third generation of new towns. Security, a safe city, environment-friendly city, and data-driven city was a direction that we were able to come up with after this analysis. So the vision for the third generation of the new town is to create a future city of coexistence and co-prosperity where we can apply a new lifestyle. And so we want to realize a Green New Deal based carbon neutral city, and also we want to operate an innovative DNA based city. And so we came up with 8 major smart city services, and also we came up with 6 specialized models for urban innovation, and we came up with initiatives and plans to apply the smart city technologies. So first of all, how we came up with the services that will be applied. We first did a survey and analysis. For example, we looked at the national pilot project smart city services, and we identified whether these are innovative technology-based services or more sophisticated technology services. For example, there is the 8 major areas for the 52 smart city services that we identified, including transportation, safety, environment, energy, business, logistics, etc. And so there were 5 under safety, and there were 7 under environment, and 5 for energy, and for business and logistics and healthcare. There were these specific technology-based services that we identified were needed. So, based on what we were able to identify, we came up with 6 specialized models for the third generation Newtown smart cities. And let me tell you how we will be applying this model. First of all, the first specialized model that we came up with is for the Namyangju Wangsuk district. Well, there's a high potential for applying it to this area, and it's about the public transportation operation system. We want to innovate it so that we can ensure swift mobility and convenience in access. So we will be utilizing autonomous vehicles and also optimize the routes for the public transportation so that there is greater integration in the public transportation system in this region. So, for example, the users can utilize the PMs from their homes, and then they can go on to take the autonomous buses and reach their destination. We thought about what is most needed here. Smart mobility service, smart street services were what we identified were needed and should be provided to the citizens. And if you look on the bottom right, we will be building the right smart infrastructure, and we will be able to gather real-time data from this infrastructure. And based on the data, we will be able to provide adequate services. Number 2, the specialized model here is a digital New Deal education innovation model, and it will be applied to the Namyangju Wangsuk Second District. So there will be a smart edu park that will be created as a foundation for lifelong education and making this a lifelong education city. So there will be integrated space creation that will be the direction for the city. In this digital New Deal education model, as you can see, there will be support for education of the youth and also health management, also strengthening communication among the family members, promoting economic activities. And for that, we will be providing the right adequate services. For example, the smart integrated community services, integrated education experiential services, and smart street services. And on the bottom, you will see the smart infrastructure that is needed, which is the smart community education facilities, the smart leisure facilities, and the smart crosswalks. And also from these infrastructure, we will be collecting data, and the data will once again be reflected into the systems and services. Number 3 is the logistics and distribution innovation model, which will be applied to the Hanam Gyosan district. This is to optimize the operation efficiency of the logistics system and also to ensure accurate delivery services 24/7 in this innovative city. And for this, we will be establishing the infrastructure, for example, smart containers and etc. Now, as you can see on the top left, there are the logistics vehicles, and we'll be utilizing autonomous robots as well to complete the delivery service. For this, we will be providing a number of services, for example, the smart automated logistics delivery service. So as I mentioned before, we'll be coming up with a smart infrastructure, and once again, the data will be abstracted from the smart infrastructure, and once again, the data will be reflected in the systems and services. Number 4 is the environment response innovation model, which will be applied to the city of Incheon, the Gyeongsang district. So we want to maintain a livable environment, and we also want to create an environment-friendly water facility or waterside facility. And the scenario for the services that will be provided includes how the city will respond to fine dust and depleted air quality. And based on the digital twin platform the city will be managed. And also there will be drones used for monitoring the water quality. And so all of these environment-related data will be created through this infrastructure, and the data will be once again reflected to improve the systems and services. Number 5 is the model for responding to climate change in an innovative model, and this model innovative city, and this will be applied to the Goyang Changneung district. As you can see, an energy integrated management system will be built. If you look at the services that will be provided, first of all, energy data will be collected and the energy usage and volume will be analyzed. And at the same time, renewable energy resources will be utilized. For example, the hydrogen energy will be produced and stored. For the service, the PV housing and smart buildings will be built, and also data will be abstracted from the infrastructure. And once again, the data will be used to upgrade the services. The last specialized model is the model for innovating the industries and businesses, and this will be applied to the city of Bucheon in the Daejeon district. And so this will be about creating a smart innovative plaza for realizing a tech city, which will be the hub of advanced industrial innovation. And so there will be a venue for innovative business exchanges, for example, and services such as the following will be provided. There will be services provided to those who want to start their own businesses, and also there will be a zone for promoting innovative R&D exchanges and support to the businesses. And smart infrastructure such as innovative R&D zone will be built. Data will come out from the smart infrastructure, which will once again be reflected in the services. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Yes, thank you very much, Professor Kim Hyung-gyu. He talked about the third generation Newtown and what kind of smart city models will be applied. Thank you very much for your presentation.
네 번째 발표.
We will now hear from our fourth speaker. The topic of the fourth presentation is Big Data-based Smart Urban Planning and Future Prospects. The speaker is Professor Lee Jung of University of Seoul.
네, 안녕하세요. 방금
Good day, everyone. I am Lee Hee-jung, professor at the University of Seoul, and I am also the director of the Big Data AI Research Lab. In my presentation, I want to talk about the future prospects of the big data-based smart urban planning. At the Davos Forum, it indicated that we will be seeing a hyper-intelligent and a hyper-connected society. In other words, that we will be becoming a smart or smarter city. But when we say smart, what is smart in the first place? Our speakers from Singapore and from Cambridge, and as mentioned by our speakers from home, there are different concepts as well as definitions. Sometimes it's about big data-based urban planning, and other times it's about smart city planning. And the point that I would like to make today is that it's important to understand what we mean by smart urban planning. In addition to today's moderator of the panel session to follow, Vice President Choi Mong-bun, and with the colleagues at Seoul Metropolitan Government, we decided to engage in this research to understand what would smart be all about for Seoul in the future. And as you can see here on this slide, we thought that in this research, the smart city would be a city that solves urban problems quickly while answering to the diverse needs of citizens. And there are also views that when we say it's a smart city, it would be about having an urban process in place and solving the problems, or having a smart process in place. A smart city planning process consists of many phases. But I think that there may be different views on the phases. So I wanted to present my view on that process. The first process, or phase one of the process, would be UPIS, or Urban Planning Information System. From 10 years back, urban planning was about utilizing data and information. And there were discussions on how we can well utilize this information, which led to the foundation of the Urban Planning Information System, or UPIS. This system starts off with digitizing the information. And with information becoming data, we can analyze the data, collect the data in a convenient fashion, and we can also assess the data, making urban planning more intelligent than in the past. So I believe that this is probably the first version of SMART for urban planning, but there were many challenges because the system among systems were different, and the data management system was different depending on the city. So we thought that maybe we should go one step or one layer higher to the national level rather than just focus on the cities. And that led to the Korea Land Use Information Platform, or KLIP. This platform is a national platform. The government decides on the standard of the data, and integrated services and data connectivity was the focus. Whenever we engage in urban planning, what happens is we have to collect the data and survey the data, and it takes a lot of time and effort as well as costs. However, we believe that with this integrated platform, we may be able to save costs as well as time. So that was the objective of this KLIP. And yes, it did achieve its goal in shaving costs, in addition to an economic value of 25 billion. So it lessened the administrative burden, it cut costs, it saved time, labor as well. So this was the second evolution of the so-called smart city. And with the cloud, we believe that the system will be upgraded one step further to increase the scope and scale. With the second generation KLIP, urban planning started to once again evolve to move on to the bespoke phase based on big data. In the industrialized world, it was about the minimum safety and sanitation that should be guaranteed, and it was about offering basic infrastructure. So those were the times when urban planning was centered on the supplier. As was mentioned by Professor Lindendale, in the future, we need to become a human-centered city. And we also need to be a city where we do see some personalization in the localities. Samsung Electronics also has their bespoke program, their products. They do focus on this value. And KLIP and the second generation of KLIP made great contributions in that endeavor. And we can also see that urban challenges are moving on to looking into smart responses. This is something that Seoul metropolitan government has been pursuing. So I call this the smartization of urban problems, but what this means is that utilizing the KLIP, the fact that we can utilize digital means to solve problems is now a reality. When we solve urban problems, we need spatial data. We have to accumulate this spatial data, and with new analysis tools and processes, we can derive new solutions. And I believe that this evolution shows that this is indeed possible. In addition to that, we can use AI to analyze the city and integrate data into integrated open database systems. And we have transportation, environment, and other domains where the information in these individual domains can be connected together so that we have a multidimensional approach in solving the urban problems of the modern society. So then, what will we have to do in the future? I think we need to make the next leap forward. The third generation Newtown or Sejong City, and also in the case of Singapore, we did see that there are many efforts being made in this journey towards the smart city. If we think about urban planning and if we think about urban services for citizens that can enjoy, will Seoul be able to be at the center in creating the future city? And will it enable a sustainable city? And will it be able to enhance or improve the services of the citizens to raise the quality of life? These are some of the questions that we need to answer. And a future Korea urban integration platform will enable this. In the future, an integrated urban platform will not be solely reliant on the data that's generated by us. It will be able to real-time generate its own set of data, be trained, and acquire new knowledge. It's true that sensors and the citizens' needs and preferences have been collected bottom up and it was reprocessed and shared. And this open platform will be able to scale, and the private sector will be the supplier as well as well, it will be both supply and demand, and the government will be able to play multiple roles and share its vision of sustainability with all of the stakeholders. And for this to be possible, there are many tools and technologies that are necessary. Real-time information collection using automated sensors should be in place, and 5G and IoT and other network connection issues should all be resolved. Not only that, we have a blockchain and a trust-based society that would help us engage in integrated data management as well as maintenance of such data. And AI, image recognition, and motion detection tools and other analytical tools will be necessary. And when we move on to decision making, we may go into the digital twin world. Urban planning sometimes may involve politics, and we may be seeing some bias of individuals. Furthermore, the results may differ depending on the determination and will of leadership. Not only that, if we think about the sentiment in the real estate market, it may lead to some instabilities. However, the digital twin and the future integrated platform will be able to help us remain all the more objective than skewed. And with the digital twin, we can understand some future challenges beforehand, prepare in advance, and find a way to allocate the budget in an optimal fashion. In other words, a smart urban planning in its true sense will be possible by utilizing such digital twin technologies. For the past 20, 30 years, cities grew. And this is one example of our city through AI, neural network, and machine learning. This computer was trained. And in the case of our third generation new town and the new GTX, transportation system will lead to different types of land use. And if you want to understand the impact of these programs, we can use these technologies to understand and prepare in advance. In the future, carbon neutrality and the climate crisis is in the front burner, and we also have COVID-19. We can say that we have many challenges threatening our survival. And considering that, sustainability of the city and the eco-friendliness of the city will be something that we need to attain. And for that to be possible, urban planning, urban design can go through this prediction model by using this neural network. As I've already mentioned, we can create a digital twin of Seoul metropolitan city, and in this virtual environment, we can simulate transport, circulation, construction, traffic, and understand the impacts of various natural disasters. We can diagnose the situation in advance and also find ways as to how we can achieve sustainability and carbon neutrality. So as mentioned, diagnosis, simulations can be possible for us to build a more optimal future smart city. And we need to prepare beforehand to make all this a reality. I think that we've now moved beyond. We're moving beyond to the phase of metaverse. The Green New Deal and the Digital New Deal was announced by the government that it would be committing its investments in these programs. And we can say that these are some of the efforts of the government to create a smarter city. And another element here that I would like to emphasize is that it should be human-centered and that it should be customized for the localities. And these values should be a premise in these programs. So big data-based urban diagnosis and AI-based urban planning and the platform to analyze that and to facilitate that platform is something we need in the future. And we have big, middle, small cities where pilot projects may be possible. And I know that we already have R&D efforts underway to find the optimal pilot destinations. And we have environment, traffic, data collection, reprocessing, analysis, and utilization. And these are all a part of the program that we have. And through these processes, we will be able to create the third generation future-oriented land and urban integration platform, making and creating a truly smart city. The future city and the smart city requires consensus of citizens because it's about creating a future where everybody will live happy lives and also an environmental friendly and sustainable city where diverse values are coexist. It should be an inclusive society. And with digital twin technologies and to go one step further with metaverse technologies, we will be able to put in place a robust plan. So the digital twin, metaverse, and other urban planning response and management systems and the efforts to create these systems will come in handy. So the Living Lab and other feasible programs or customized efforts will help us truly realize this future smart city. We can demonstrate, trial, simulate various cases to realize the future that we want. In the case of Singapore, I think that it is a very robust case that we can benchmark. And we know that these efforts are underway in many advanced nations, including the UK, and we should take note of these efforts. And I believe that big data and artificial intelligence are already changing many parts of our lives. We're talking about post-COVID as well as the with COVID era. And we know that future changes will be expedited with accurate prediction and analysis by using big data in IT. And by doing that, we can reduce the trial and error and provide a customized and a wise society centered on humans. And with that, let me end my presentation. Thank you.
네, 이정 교수님 대단히 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee, for your presentation. It was an invaluable presentation to understand the true big data-based smart city. We went through all of the 4 presentations. We'll now take a 10-minute break and then move on to panel discussions. Thank you.
네, 지금부터
We will now begin the 2021 WSCE Future of Smart Urban Planning based on Big Data seminar panel discussion. Dr. Choi Bong-moon, professor of Mogon University, will serve as a moderator. Please go ahead. Yes, good afternoon. I am the moderator of this panel discussion from Mogon University. My name is Choi Bong-moon, and I am also the vice president of the Korea Planning Association. Today we are hosting this event under the theme of Future Smart Urban Planning based on Big Data. And this is actually a theme that is dealt with at the World Smart City Expo, which holds great significance. Now, I think that we are now talking about how we can utilize data and build the cities based on data. And in terms of advancing smart cities and planning for cities, I do believe that this will be a continuing trend. And the 4 presenters, actually the 4 presenters today touched on various topics, but there was something in common. The presenters talked about topics that can provide insight for the further advancement of Korea's smart cities. So I would like to thank the presenters for their insightful presentations. Today we have with us 5 panelists for the panel discussion. There are 3 people here offline and also 2 joining us through our online platform via Zoom. Now we will follow the order in our proceeding, and when I call upon your name, please acknowledge the crowd. First of all, joining us via Zoom, we have Professor Lee Jae-seung of Seoul National University. Yes, hello, I am Lee Jae-seung of SNU. Thank you very much for waiting and joining us. From Singapore, we have with us Professor Lee Kwan-ok of the Singapore National University. Yes, hello. Yes, very nice to meet you. And also, we have 3 people joining us here on my far right from the Data Science Center of the Seoul Technology Institute. We have Dr. Choi Jun-young. Thank you for joining us. And also from Seoul Metropolitan Government, Mr. Lee Soo-jae, who is in charge of big data. Thank you very much for joining us. And last but not least, from MOLIT, in charge of urban planning and policy, we have Mr. Lee Jong-hyun. You don't have to be too careful in greeting them with a round of applause. Please applause away. Now, as you well know, nowadays we have this hybrid version of conferences and seminars. I know that it might feel a bit awkward, but this is the way to go. So we have 5 panel discussants, and we only have 40 minutes given to us. And all of the presentations were very insightful and interesting, so I don't think that we will have enough time to touch upon all of the aspects that were mentioned. But I would like to give 5 minutes first to the panel discussants. That way, we will be able to hand over the microphone to the presenters as well before we wrap up. And if you have any questions for the speakers, then also make sure to identify that it is a question addressed to a particular speaker. So first, I would like to ask those joining us online to comment. Professor Lee Jae-sin, please go ahead.
네, 안녕하세요.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for all of the four wonderful presentations. Rather than posing the questions on the individual presentations, I just want to give you my overall impression, and I will pose one question to Professor Raymond Ong. First of all, I think that there are many ways to look at the smart city, and as was mentioned by Professor Lee Hee-jung, it could be a data-based or there are many efforts that are being made to make the right decision based on various scientific means. We have a lot of data that we can use right now, and we can process that, and we can seek insights by utilizing various methodologies. And whether it be administration or whether it be in the private sector, such insights are being used, and I hope that we can drive even fruitful results or outcome from this. But of course, we don't only have a rosy future. There are challenges along the way and many hurdles along the way. So these new data methodologies, how can this be utilized in urban planning in a systematic fashion? I think that we need maybe the right institutional framework to have us and enable us to take advantage of such new data-driven technologies.
여러 가지 합의라던가 제도 조사 누가 이루어졌으면
So
하는
once again, I think we need a consensus as well as an institutional framework to make sure that we can take advantage of all of these new
있는데
options.
교수님께서 보여주신 것처럼
And as was mentioned by Professor Lindenthal, I do know that there are more possibilities in using
개인적으로는
imagery.
이미지를
I
활용하면서
personally also use images to train myself on space, and I'm also engaging in such research, and that's why your presentation was very interesting for me.
갖고 있는
But
어려움들도
there are
있는데
challenges, and as was mentioned by Professor Lindenthal, I think that you may have been faced with challenges in acquiring data.
생각이 들고요.
There might be challenges in
지금 뭐 테슬라가
acquiring the
어디로
optimal
가야
volume of data. But if we look at what Tesla is saying,
주행을 통해서 자율주행이나
image processing
얘기를 하는데
is noted to be used for autonomous driving in the future. But what we can say is, yes, there are immense opportunities here, but in urban planning, in architecture, in order to use these images, there are, of course, a lot of efforts that are necessary behind the scenes. So I think that we need that critical mass.
사람들에게
And for me, it's quite difficult
구체적으로 이게 어떤 요소가 이런 결과를
sometimes when it's very difficult to decipher why such an outcome was derived from the data. So I hope that we have some more research on that when it comes to people's and individuals' perspectives. But satellite imagery and various technologies will help us enhance land use management.
그리고 레이먼드 교수님과 좀
And Professor Raymond Ong and Professor Kim talked about the Singapore as well as the third generation new town. So you talked about the various services as well as an overview of what's in place in Korea and Singapore. And thank you very much for helping to better my understanding.
하신
And in particular, what was mentioned by Professor Raymond Ong, he talked about the inclusive cities, and he talked about what is being done at Singapore. In Singapore, I was really impressed by the work done there.
소도시를 만들면서
But as in Singapore, in Korea, we are building new cities. And I think that there are positive aspects to providing smart services. From the planning stage, we can think about how the smart cities will be made, and there can be intervention from the planning stage throughout the process. So that can be an advantage.
그렇지만 이런
But at the same time,
여러 가지 서비스 제공을 위해서
in order to provide services, there has to be a lot of infrastructure. And how can these infrastructures be built, and who should operate and manage these infrastructures? I think that we have to think about that as well. For example, you talked about EV charging centers, the charging facilities and infrastructure. In the future, everyone probably agrees that EV will be the future of mobility or automobiles. But when we think about environmental aspects, of course, the EVs have to be further promoted. And for that, we need the infrastructure, the charging stations. And in Korea,
충전소 보급을
the charging stations are being established by the public sector, and we have some difficulty in terms of the maintenance of these infrastructure. If you look at the US case, you can see that ChargePoint and the private sector, for example, are taking the initiative in building the infrastructure, so it's more private sector driven in the United States.
그 EV 충전소를 대표되는
So the smart city infrastructure and EV charging stations are one of them. Now, what should be the governance system for the infrastructure? I think that we have to put some thought into that as well. Last but not least, so I have a question for Professor Raymond Ong in Singapore. Now, for the charging stations in Singapore, how are they being provided? Is it public sector driven? And also for the long-term maintenance and management, what are the strategies that are implemented? Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. So because of the time constraint, I will not summarize what was mentioned, but Professor Lee Jae-seung actually shared his views and the challenges that he felt, and he also talked about the private sector and the public sector being involved in the build-up of the infrastructure for smart cities. And there was a question raised to Dr. Ong in terms of the supply of the infrastructure, and realistically, how are they being supplied and provided and maintained? So also, I think that Professor Lee Ga-nok, she can touch upon this briefly as she speaks as well. So Professor Lee Ga-nok, I understand that you have prepared something very long, but I can only give you 5 minutes, so please make it concise. Please go ahead.
Thank you for having me as a discussion today, and many thanks for hold on, I want to off the translation. So thank you for having me as a discussion today, and many thanks to four speakers on their excellent presentations. I found two main themes quite interesting during the presentation. The first one is the application of big data and AI to planning research, and the other is the how we apply smart city features to actual planning practices. Although I really want to answer the question on the Singapore's EV, as the chair asked me to do, but I actually have no evidence or no data, so maybe Raymond can come back and talk about this later. Let me go through one by one of these two themes and add some questions so that I hope to get some comments from the panelists. So for the application of research, I found two interesting topics. The first one is on the trend of research using advanced techniques. So this has introduced his research agenda that take advantage of machine learning techniques to identify subjective perceptions of buildings and built environment. Although his analysis would be based on the big data, it seems that the most responses in his application are from the anonymous participants. If this is the case, there may be some selection and precision biases, and I guess this can be a critical issue for most similar research projects. So I would appreciate if this can give some comments. And another related topic is on the public-oriented platform for potential big data and potential to expand this big data. Professor Hee-jung Lee introduced the Korean Land Use Information Platform and Seoul's Smart Big Data Open platform. They look quite impressive in terms of their coverage and public accessibility of the urban data. This kind of database is expected not only to save huge administrative costs, but also to significantly contribute to R&D opportunities. One question that I had is whether it is feasible to expand this even with the private-based data. As we all know, the social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter have a lot of trendy urban data, such as hotspots, while ride-hailing companies like Uber or Grab and telcos such as SK Telecom own invaluable information of people's mobility behaviors. So how could we incentivize collaboration with the private sector, and are there any challenges? Now, as mentioned earlier, the next theme is on the application of smart city features to planning practices. Here again, I found two main topics. The first topic is on which feature of smart city planning we have applied so far. So for example, with the Singapore's Smart Nation case, Raymond talked about how future urban mobility system makes people's travel more efficient in terms of time and energy saving. Here, I want to add how Housing Development Board, which is the government agency for public housing development, has also used the various simulations by using the digital twin platform called Virtual Singapore before actual implementation of development plans. Seoul case gives us important lessons for how to use big data and related analysis from the beginning of the planning process, especially at the stage of identifying issues and formulating visions of the cities. Although only briefly mentioned by Professor Lee, Seoul has used the word crowd and language analysis, and this is really advanced technique than the simple survey. So could save a lot of administrative costs. At the later stage, artificial intelligence simulation could be applied to 3D simulations for the urban planning process. So again, this can save a lot of cost, in my opinion. So here, my question is a bit naive. Why do we do the big data-based smart city planning? In particular, what are the tangible benefits to the government? So if there is any chance, I'd like to hear comments from the panel on the cost and benefit of this smart city application in the planning practice. We all know that the developing smart city features and practically applying them involve huge public costs and resources. So we have to make sure the benefits outweigh the costs. The final topic is on how practical smart city planning application has been in different parts of the world and what we should prioritize with the limited resources. So Professor Hyung-Kyu Kim's presentation, we could get a lot of useful hints from the survey of the citizens' need and expectation during the new town planning process in South Korea. It seems that the issues related with mobility and environment are the ones that we would want to tackle first. This is somewhat consistent with Raymond, who said earlier about how Singapore has concentrated its efforts on smart transport infrastructure. And as we cannot change the entire urban system at once, stacking up and phasing plans are critical. And Singapore case is a good example of how to move from the initial trials and test bed of future urban mobility to broader nationwide implementation. Similarly, the third generation Newtown case in South Korea also show how different towns adopt different features and specialized models. So it seems that the smart city features are relatively easier to be applied in the new development projects. But how feasible is this to be integrated into the existing developed areas? That's my question, and I would appreciate if our panel could share their thoughts on this. Finally, during the panelist presentations, I had a broader question on how application of big data-based smart city planning would impact all of us in the urban planning field. As mentioned earlier, we will find more automation of the planning process. Then what is the role of urban planners in future, and how we should revise our planning education to meet the future needs? So I'll stop here and I look forward to the discussions now. Thank you.
네, 이관욱 교수님 감사합니다. 얼마 전에 싱가포르 들어가셔서
Yes, thank you very much. I know that you probably had to engage in self-quarantine when you went back to Singapore, but I think that you're now back in your office. So that's quite fortunate, and I hope that you stay safe in Singapore. And I have high expectations for your research. You actually provided us with a lot of comments as well as questions, and I can see that you had questions, relevant questions for all of our speakers. So when we do give the floor to the speakers, we would like to ask the speakers to try to answer or respond to what Professor Lee Kwan-wook has posed. So then let us now move on to the comments by the panelists here offline. First, let us hear from Mr. Choi Jun-young, or Dr. Choi Jun-young of Seoul Institute of Technology. I am Choi Jun-young, working at the Data Science Center at SIT. Professor Lee Kwan-wook has given us a lot of insightful comments, and what I would like to comment on today is particularly focused on the theme of today's conference, which is big data-based smart urban planning. I want to talk about datafication and about digitalization, about which is digitalizing traditional services. And smart planning and smart management also has an angle of urban science. So I want to comment on these fronts. First, I would like to comment on the presentation by Professor Raymond Dong.
아무래도 싱가포르라는 도시국가에서 우리가 이제 버추얼 싱가포르부터 해가지고 많은 다양한 우수한 사례가 있었는데, 특히나 이제 계획이라고 하는 것이 앞으로 이제 스마트에서 데이터 중심적이고 데이터 인센티브한 이제 환경이 된다고 하셨고, 거기에 어플리케이션으로 이제 어반 모빌리티를 중심으로 해가지고 그 전기차 충전소라든가 이런 분석을 제시해 주셨는데, 아무래도 이제 그 데이터 기반이라고 한다면 결국에는 도시 활동 체계라는 것이 그 데이터화 돼야지만 우리가 좀 더 면밀하게 분석할 수 있다고 생각이 되고요. 그런 면에서 도시국가인 싱가포르의 장점이 많이 묻어 있는 이런 접근법이라고 생각이 들었습니다. 그리고 특히나
And because of the characteristics of Singapore, I think that this was a more applicable approach. Now, I also think that the integrated urban transportation planning was also mentioned. And now, I think that all the different fields of the city will be integrated further, and transportation will be integrated with the other aspects of city living. And so, to have an integrated approach, integrated planning, I think that we need to have the data as a basis. So that was my takeaway from the presentation. Now, also, you talked about the inclusive city, and when we are planning for a smart city, well, up till now, because of the many different conditions, I think that we utilize individual data, and we also reflected demographic features, for example, the data regarding the gender or the age or the income level. So it was not really an integrated data, but we try to utilize the data that we had to provide services in a more equal manner. Now,
Professor Lindenthal talked about machine learning and real estate. Machine learning is receiving the spotlight, especially in urban planning these days. So with regard to objects and images, it's classified through machine learning. And in the past, in many cases, there were areas that were just qualitatively analyzed. However, with machine learning, there are new ways to analyze the situation. We did see many literature and presentations at KPA as well on machine learning, meaning that this methodology is probably quite well rooted in this sphere amongst the academia. as was mentioned by the speaker, with regard to the black box approach, sometimes it doesn't seem as clear, and also the process of driving outcome or the output, sometimes it may not seem as transparent. But as this speaker has mentioned, it's about finding a more consistent way to build and to make decisions. And if we can do that, there are some skewed or biases to human decision making, but with machine learning, of course, human must be at the center. However, if we do want consistent decision making, well, we think that there are some good positive possibilities in machine learning. And our third presenter talked about the third generation Newtown.
발표를
And the presentation was by Professor Kim Young-kyung. Thank you very much for the presentation. Now, the third generation of Newtown development is Greenfield Development. It's building a city in undeveloped land where people do not yet live. But this is an environment that does not have data, so it's difficult to collect data when there is nothing there. So you have to build the services, you have to build the specialized models to apply to these new towns. And as it was mentioned by the presenter, as the services are developed and operated, sufficient amount of data has to be collected and reflected once again back into the services, and monitoring has to consistently take place. But what I want to mention is that at present, we are under the pandemic situation, and many things have changed. Among one would be that there is more non-face-to-face activities. For example, in the past, we would go and eat in restaurants, but now we are just taking out or ordering food from our home. So we really have to prepare for the post-COVID-19 situation and optimize the services. For example, in the third generation new towns, there are many representative services. What caught my eye was the delivery robot service. And within the apartment complexes, such non-face-to-face remote logistics services will be provided. And I think that these types of services actually will be a daily norm in the third generation new towns because it will be the post-COVID-19 era. Now, the Audit Agency of Korea conducted an audit on smart cities, the third generation new towns in Sejong City and the Busan Elko Delta, and also the existing towns and cities are what we have to take interest in going forward. In terms of thinking about the future smart city features, we also have to think about the costs associated with running these smart city related services, or else we will not be able to have sustainability in providing these services. So we have to keep our eyes on the costs as well. And also, as we open up this era of smart cities, someone will have to manage and operate the smart cities. I think that not only the public sector, but also the private sector has to dive in as well. So we really have to think about who will be in charge of what. For example, everything will be data driven, but really who will be taking care of what and who will participate. We have to think about that as well.
Robert Lee talked about big data-based urban planning, and it was about what SMART is all about. Was all about, and particularly he talked about how to solve urban problems with SMART methodologies. If we look at transformation, for instance. Right now, with ICT data and traffic data, we are able to engage in and also complement demand survey. So in that sense, we can actually utilize smart technology to complement traditional methodologies. VR simulation utilizing image, I think also can replace a landscape simulation of what we've been using in the past. And last but not least, I do want to mention that MOLIT is to begin a big data-based smart urban planning research program soon enough, and I hope that all of these findings and insights be reflected in these programs. And once we can do that, I think that we can make all of this more feasible in the cities. And because, well, I am with the Seoul Institute of Technology, but I want to say that Seoul, or the metropolitan area, plays a pivotal role as the capital city. And I think that standardization and exchange of data is something that's necessary, and we need to provide the right platform to make that possible. Yes, thank you, and I do apologize for not giving you enough ample time, but thank you very much for that comprehensive comment. And moving on, we just heard from those in research and academia, and let us now move on to a distinguished guest from the public sector. First, we have from Seoul Metropolitan Government, Director Lee Soo-jae.
Yes, I am with the Seoul Metropolitan Government. I am in charge of big data. My name is Lee Soo-jae, and I would like to thank the four speakers for their excellent presentations today. We are talking about the future of smart urban planning based on big data. Seoul City also has a 6X strategy to develop smart cities within Seoul. Now, we talk about data-based smart city planning, but I think that sometimes we don't discuss data sufficiently enough when we talk about smart cities. The reason I'm saying this is that in the era of smart cities, data is most important, but we really have to think about the flow of data more. So first of all, I would like to mention 4 points. First of all, in smart cities, we need to have an integrated data management. We say that we are living in an era of big data, but in some sense, I think that we utilize existing the statistical data that we had and administrative data. But the difference is that big data is the real-time data that we are able to collect through ICT. And now we are seeing a flood of big data, and the ICT data is being collected in the private and public sector. We need to have an integrated management system for managing the data. So big data, we will have to continue to manage the usable data. For example, in the private sector, there will be the finance-related data, and also there will be usable data in the public sector as well. There are information that we want to take out from the data, but the thing is we don't have the system established to really extract the important information from the data that is being generated. So we have to think about what is the important data that is needed in smart cities. We have to define the information that we need, and then we have to go towards the database planning after that. So the data, for example, the statistical data that we had for research and study purposes, how are we going to use that along with the ICT driven or collected data? And number two, well, the metaverse simulation programs have to be further implemented, because smart cities, when we're planning them, well, Seoul has a 5-year plan for the smart cities as well, and we have the implementation plans, but these are just words written on paper. When we're planning for smart cities, we have to have a certain level of smart city models or technology, and then we should do the metaverse simulations. Well, we have augmented reality that we can apply. When it comes to augmented reality, AR, for example, we can take the case of the Hangang Park, the Han River Park. For example, what people expect from the Han River Park and what are the needs that are satisfied through this place. So we can do simulations to identify that. And based on that, we can build a model for a Han River Park. And also there is the virtual reality. Smart cities provide housing, and also there is a plan for the housings that will be developed and also the roads that will be built. So we can build a metaverse environment, and then we can utilize avatars to do simulations and have the avatars actually live in that space and environment. So then the data-based smart cities can be planned more in detail and then be constructed. And number three, I think that for the data-driven or data-based smart cities, we really have to talk about the public goods, data. Well, for example, the IoT services and home services are provided by the developers. And smart cities on the one hand, I think is tied with a big brother issue, but also at the same time, public good is pursued. For example, in the era of COVID-19, we need the data to actually provide good to the public. So this data, in some sense, is in the public realm as well. It can be seen as a public good in some sense. So I think that we really have to think about the institutions that are in place at this moment. For example, when you are building an apartment complex, there is the public land that is used, and so the public resources are utilized for providing the services and the goods to the people. So I think that in some sense we have to consider the data as part of the public good that can be utilized for the benefit of the people. And last but not least, I think that the concept of my data has to be further expanded. So the data has to be based on my data, and I think mass service, in order for that to be implemented, this concept of my data has to be further expanded and relevant services have to be built. So to summarize, in order to build data-based smart cities, there are some elements that we have to further consider. For example, AI technology will be better utilized if we can actually fill in these missing elements. Thank you very much. So in Korea, well, there are many innovative smart city projects that are ongoing. And so as part of the public sector and the government, the panel discussant gave his views. Thank you very much.
Our last panelist is Lee Jong-hyun, Deputy Director of Urban Policy Division at MOLIT. The Urban Policy Division of MOLIT is organizing this event, and he's also in charge of R&D, so I'm sure that there may be some insightful comments on his side. Very nice to meet you all. I am Deputy Director Lee Jong-hyun of Urban Policy Division at MOLIT. Thank you all for the presentations, and I can see that there are diverse views here. And if I may just briefly introduce the policies of MOLIT. I think there are two sides to our policies. One is smart technology and urban planning based on big data. And we have the smart city where smart solutions are offered. So I think we can divide it up into these two, but I would like to go into detail on the former. Urban planning is about presenting the long-term development vision of the city. But if we look at urban planning, local governments have been engaging in this process up till now. However, key decision-making or key judgments need to be supported by reasonable and significant data, but this wasn't the case. And in that aspect, what we want to do is to put together a platform in our R&D arm to help that out. We will be investing the budget starting from next year, and we have a 5-year project to be conducted, and it's about putting together an urban planning platform. When we engage in urban planning, we first diagnose the city, and we identify indicators to understand the current status of the city and monitor that. So we devise the plan, and we monitor, and we see whether the plans are being implemented as originally planned. So this platform is to help that process out. And to simply put, let's take the example of parks or roads. When you want to create parks or roads, it's important to understand the most frequented areas by the citizens and have these parks and roads located in such areas. And to make that decision, it's important to have that data, and we want to have that data on this platform so that it can be shared and utilized by urban planners. Right now, we are still in the initial phase of policy division, but we want to start this program next year. And I would like to ask for your active participation as well as your feedback. And I think that this session has also served as an important opportunity for me to add all of your comments to the program. Thank you for saving the time.
Today, we heard about the third generation of Newtown development and also the urban planning R&D project. I think this is the first time that we're talking about this in a public discussion venues, and I do hope that we have more opportunities to deal with these topics. Now, we have heard from our 5 panel discussants. I wanted to open the floor for Q&A, but because of the time constraint, well, and because we have speakers waiting via our online platform, Zoom, so I think that we will not be able to receive questions from the floor, but I would like to ask our 2 foreign speakers to respond to the questions, and then if time remains, then we will allow for the participants here at the venue to speak. So first of all, Professor Raymond Wong, if you can respond to the questions that were directed to you, and also any further comments related to what was mentioned during the panel's discussion, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. First, I would like to speak about a few of the questions that was raised, mainly on the institution aspect, the electric vehicle infrastructure aspect, and the benefit and cost aspect. I think that institution plays a very important role to ensure that there is a clear format where data can be easily stored and exchanged in a database. Now, in Singapore, we have the data.gov.xg, which is actually the government database center, which actually holds data across multiple ministries and the government agencies. Now, so basically, all our government and public data are aligned and are common. So I could be from a certain ministry and I could actually get access to another ministry's data, provided that they agree to share the data. And we can actually do collaborative work across multiple ministries. Now, the challenge that I see, based on my own experience, is that when it comes to private data, it becomes much more challenging because private companies actually have their own considerations in sharing data. So this is where I think a marketplace or database platform would be very important to actually share private data that is less sensitive, but will actually bring better good for everyone. And the second question that I would like to address is that on the question on the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Now, as of last week, our government has recently announced the award of 2 tenders to private operators who will be operating the charging infrastructures. So what we are adopting is that we do the planning of the infrastructures and how we actually plan the urban area around it. But when it goes to the operation state, the government would be the overall custodian on the standards and the service level. And the operators will be actually paying some concessionaire to actually operate the charging infrastructure operation. And in fact, these would be something that will be ongoing when we have more and more packages to come. Now, these are actually on public land. Now, on let's say private development such as commercial malls, condominiums, or private properties, things are a little bit more challenging because the private operators will have the freedom to decide whether they will want to operate or they will actually lease it out for a private operator to operate. So these are some of the new operating models for charging infrastructures that we would like to see. And the main drive for it in terms of benefit and cost is that what we see today is that in the short run, we may actually see it's more costly to actually run electric vehicles at this point in time, primarily because the technology is still developing. But my forecast is that when we reach 2030 or so, we will actually see the electric vehicle having a larger range and the charging technology would have been much improved so that we will actually have a much more efficient or financially sustainable model to move about. And as Singapore, as being a small city or country, this is actually an important initiative because gasoline or diesel-related transportation is contributing a significant amount of carbon emission. So as we move towards being carbon neutral, this amount will actually help us to save as a nation as a whole to actually reduce the carbon the carbon tax that will come along in the very near future. So that is actually the three things that I want to answer. And I'm very happy to see actually there's so many more developments that's done in Korea, and it's actually very interesting. And I have to applaud that we have done a very good job in all these technologies in Korea. Thanks.
네, 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you very much. And now let us go to Dr. Keith Lindenthal.
소감이나 이런 부분에 대해
So your comments on any of the presentations, maybe within 3 minutes if possible, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for all the comments. They're very insightful, and I appreciate them very much. I would like to address two questions in particular. The first one was by Professor Lee Jae-sung, and it was about the difficulty of finding data for machine learning models. And yes, of course, data are the big bottleneck, but they've become so much easier to find in the last years. And it's not just the data, it's also the models to analyze the data, and also then the algorithms and techniques to better understand what's happening inside these models. They have been so much more accessible in recent years. So in that sense, the threshold to run these applied machine learning analyses has come down tremendously. So the cost has come down, and we should see a lot more of that, both in academia and in the industry. So this is really golden times for applied machine learning analysis. Addressing the point by Professor Lee Kwan-ok about the representativity of our work, obviously those people that we selected are not representative of, let's say, a new development at any place in the world. But this is not really the point that we try to make. What we try to do is we try to find a way to model individuals. So not a one-size-fits-all approach, but to really be able to extract the preferences and the perceptions of humans, and not as a class, but on their own. And that, I think, is really a new and big and challenging thing, because if we talk about, let's say, the metaverse simulation systems that Yi Su-jae has mentioned, well, what do we throw into these simulations in terms of our concept of those people who then later use a park or who later use a new development? And I think we shouldn't just throw in one representative agent there, but we should then try to model the differences across people more carefully. And that is really my main insight from the research we've been doing, is that we shouldn't treat everybody the same. Thank you.
예, 감사합니다. 박수 부탁드립니다.
Yes, thank you very much.
그리고 발제를 하는
Yes, today we had so many excellent insights provided, but unfortunately we were not given sufficient time. I apologize for not being able to open the floor for Q&A. Now, the presentations and also the panel discussion will be provided to you via YouTube, and also the main points will also be provided through our organization as well. So I do believe that also, if you have any further questions, please contact the speakers, and I ask the speakers to faithfully answer their questions. So once again, thank you very much to the speakers and the panel discussants. I apologize for not being able to give you another opportunity to speak, the people here at the venue. With this, I would like to close this session. Thank you very much.
네.
Thank you. We heard from our 4 speakers from home and abroad, as well as from our 6 panelists. In the future, in building the smart city in Korea, I believe that big data-based methodologies and techniques will help complete Korea's smart urban planning based on big data. I would like to extend my gratitude to all of our conference participants connecting via YouTube, and also to our speakers from abroad as well as home. Thank you very much for your participation. And with that, we would like to conclude the Future of Smart Urban Planning based on Big Data conference of the 2021 World Smart City Expo. Thank you very much.